You've been examined. Lightning and earth would be good. Not bad. Not bad at all. I'm glad I made money off this camp because I need it. Even if it's only 2K, you know? Maybe 3K. Too lazy to farm and fish. I play too many games. Try to skimp by with the least amount of gear. But still feel like I put in a competitive amount of DPS.
Your skill has increased.
43.
Incoming emote.
I am an idiot. I have... Fuck. Hope I can do this. I think I'm doing this right, yeah. It's north and I need to zoom out so I can see. Oh, that's not it, huh? Oh my god, so dumb. Yeah, I'll just death warp, I think. Yeah, this will take forever. Fuck this. I'll just death warp like him. I don't care. He's
Your
right.
skill has increased.
This will be fast too, look. This will be right quick.
Your skill has increased. Your skill has increased.
Fucking so dumb. I can't believe I fucking forgot scroll. I have two of those, right? I don't know. I can only afford one. What I do have is gammas, which is very good. I'm trying to get to the fucking... Get a scroll. I'm 51 now. No, wait, I forgot to scroll again. $750 isn't that bad. I have not really eaten today. I had a sandwich and what else? Like some peanut butter, but I might make like a burrito or something. I'm fucking hungry. It's already been 7 hours. Goddamn. Time just blows by when you're in Final Fantasy 11. It'll just whew, out the window. I fucking love it though. I like getting all this BST XP. It's good. It's fast. Get me up faster. Get up to 60 and do LB2. I can't solo it, but I can at least be 60 when I fight it. 60, capped up level 60, you know? Get to the cap and then go LB2. And probably rank 5, frankly. Get all that stupid shit out of the way. That'll be like a nice Saturday afternoon. I'll like get all hopped up on energy drink and I'll like go do all of fucking, you know, Magicite, LB5, and I still haven't done an Eco Warrior. Wait, did I go the wrong way here? No, I was going the right way. Oops. These boomers want to stay up all night. It's funny. I mean, it's morning. It's morning for them. God damn it. It's middle of the shift for me. It's so annoying. I hate this part of it. BRB. Yeah, we got a lot of snow. Better not like insta-jib my sheep because I'm like kind of skimping here. I should have placed on the market too. I'm broke. I should have admitted it. I'm broke and all I can afford is one stack of sheep. Nah, one stack will do if I take care of the health. And I really watch, you know. Like right here where I can't fucking miss it, you know. Yeah, like that. Alright. I like this song. Maybe instead of battle music, though, we'll listen to something off YouTube. I'll do that now while our buddy comes to staging. What should we listen to? Oh, the tool scam, huh? The Amway, yeah, the app scam, huh? Okay.
This video is the true story of one of the
Sean
most
Munger,
bizarre and influential
thank you for
organizations
the excellent
in
content for my
recent
stream.
American
I'd like to
history.
sub to your
The
channel.
story of the men who built it, principally this man, Dexter Yates, Marketing Corp, and the story of this organization's epic battle against the multi-level marketing.
Okay, I'm gonna sync here. Shouldn't have any problem. I'm gonna sync. Who am I syncing to? 43. There's camps. Can just camp here. Roaming. I think burn camp south along wall. I know it by sight, but I can't tell you where. Show on map. So gonna sneak us.
Incoming emote.
These guys on. Gotta fix my macro. Oh, a sheep. Oh. Go this way. Okay, the tool's called History of the Amway Motivational Tape Scam by Sean Munger.
Corporation that it both relied upon for its existence and which was also its mortal enemy at the same time. This organization, which doesn't even have an official name, was and is a business that generated hundreds of millions of dollars across 6 decades, enriched a tiny number of its top kingpins to levels of virtually unimaginable wealth, and granted those men access to the most exclusive corridors of power. To hear the stories of some who were in it, this organization also stole people's souls, drove them into poverty, and wrecked the lives of many more.
How many like the extra money you pick up on tools? Most of you are not doing half the tool business you should be doing. You know why? Because it's better than it's ever been.
The story of this organization is not exactly unknown, but it isn't often told as a story unto itself, meaning it gets mentioned on the fringes of this subject or that one, but almost no one has ever sought to chronicle its history and evaluate its significance. What is this thing whose story we're going to tell here? Who was Dexter Yeager? Who was Bill Britt and Doug Weed? Why did the corporation that hated this organization, one of whose executives wrote a memo condemning it, try to destroy it and then later surrender to it? What happened on the terrace of the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach in April 1983, and why is it important? I'm going to try to answer all those questions, and in doing so, try to forge some basis of understanding this shadowy, semi-transparent elephant that marches almost unnoticed through decades of American history. This is the story of the Amway Tools Cult. My name is Sean Munger. I'm a historian, teacher, and author, and I tell a lot of stories from history on this channel, but none have been quite like this one. This is a lengthy video and a very in-depth story. But when I think you're done, I think you'll agree that it needs to be done in depth in order to give you a full appreciation of the very strange beast that we're dealing with here. A version of this story also appears on my Substack blog, which you can find at seanmungerhistory.substack.com. I also appeared recently as a guest on a bonus episode of Roberta Blevin's podcast, Life After MLM, to tell this story. That should be out on November 16th. So shout out to Roberta and the excellent anti-MLM community, which I think might find this story particularly compelling. There's also a side video, much shorter, a companion piece to this one, where I talk a little bit about the process of researching and making this video, some of the sources I used, and some of the things I left out, some things I'm not going to cover here in the main show. First things first, I am not an MLM survivor myself, and this video is not your typical MLM horror story. While the Amway Tools Cult does still exist in the present day, which is highly troubling, my focus here is on its history and not its present incarnation. I'm a historian, and my main interest is what happened in the past and why it matters in the present. Here's how we're going to proceed. First, we have to define what the Amway Tools Cult is and how it works. There's some conceptual groundwork we have to lay, and that's not easy given the challenge of describing an organization that has no official name and which developed more or less organically, and which is also as secretive as the mafia and just about as hard to document. Then we'll be delving into the early history of the tools business, how it began, whose idea it was, and how it became such a profitable venture. Next will come the story of the battle between the Tools Cult and the Amway Corporation, which occurred principally in 1982 and 83. We're going to cover the aftermath of that battle, and we're going to have to look at how the participants in this story came to be wired into the economic, political, and religious fabric of late 20th century and 21st century America. So again, this is not just about MLMs or Amway or the religious right or even Dexter Yeager as a historical figure, although the story does touch on all
Forgot
of those
to charge
aspects.
the ring.
Periodically, I'm also going to show my sources. I did this recently on another series of videos about the true story of the JFK assassination. Oswald acted alone, by the way. And while I can't put links to all my sources directly into this video or the description, You will occasionally see them pop up on the screen, like this one just did as an example. And if you're interested in delving deeper into the documents themselves, you'll at least know where you can find them. Two primary sources are absolutely vital to this story. They are the Postma memo and the audio tape of the Miami Beach Fontainebleau Hotel meeting from April 1983, which I termed the Miami Showdown. Later in the video, you'll hear some of the actual words that were spoken that day.
With this situation you can't give up your incomes, because if you did, it means Chapter 13 or bankruptcy for you.
Good history relies on documented sources. You'll see them here, and for those perhaps sympathetic to multi-level marketing operations, my presentation of sources will prove that I'm not just making this up. So, if you're ready to delve in, let's first try to define what the tools cult is and what its relationship is to the multi-level marketing business called Amway. The entirety of this story depends on that relationship. But before we do that, you have to understand a few basics about Amway itself. There are several layers of context here that we have to get through. This is the first one. So to start, let's go back in time to the 1970s. Imagine it's sometime in the latter part of the 1970s. Vietnam is over, Jimmy Carter is in the White House, Archie Bunker is on TV, bell-bottoms and polyester are all the rage, and gas is in short supply. A friend, most likely a white middle-class man, comes to you and tells you about a great business opportunity and how he'd love to get together with you to explain it. So you get in your AMC Pacer and drive to the meeting over at your friend's house. Your friend produces butcher paper and some markers and draws a bunch of circles on them, explaining how you can make a lot of money, not by selling SA8, which is soap, or LOC, which is also soap, but by sponsoring others to sell soap, and then you take a cut of everything they make. Your friend doesn't even mention until the end of the presentation that it's Amway, and even that, the involvement of Amway seems pretty minor. They're just the corporation that manufactures the soap. What I just described is the classic Amway entry experience for tens of thousands of people, not just in the 1970s, but down to the present day. It's called showing the plan, or in slang terms, drawing circles, and a story like this is at the beginning of nearly every Amway account. Amway, a portmanteau of the words American Way, used in somewhat Orwellian fashion here, was a company founded in 1949 and eventually named Amway later by two salesmen, Richard DeVos and Jay Van Andel, who were formerly salesmen in another organization, Nutrilite, which is generally regarded as the first multi-level marketing company. Both DeVos and Van Andel were conservative evangelical Calvinists, and their fundamentalist worldview shaped the entire Amway universe. The tangled history of the invention of multi-level marketing, Nutrilite, and the founding of Amway is documented in the excellent book Ponzi-nomics, The Untold Story of Multi-Level Marketing by Robert Fitzpatrick, the leading academic who studies the MLM phenomenon and how it relates to American business history and culture. This book is essential reading for anyone who wants to understand this segment of the economy and the inner workings of the entire MLM system. Although Amway has changed a little bit since the 1970s and 1980s, the key period that I'm going to be discussing in this video, in essence today it's essentially the same as it was then. So a little bit of jargon. If you accept your friend's invitation and join Amway, what you've just done is to become a distributor, or in Amway speak an IBO, independent business owner. You've just joined a line of sponsorship. Your friend is your upline, you are in his downline, which means that that you order all of your Amway products, soap mostly, from him. All of the products. The soap that you buy for yourself, and more importantly, the stuff that you sell to the people that you recruit to sell Amway, or your downline. In the 1970s, once a week you would get into your AMC Pacer and drive to your friend's house to pick up your boxes of soap and some other stuff, which becomes important later. Anyway, you pick up your stuff at his house, and then presumably you set up a meeting for your downline, who will drive to your house in their Ford Maverick or Woody station wagon to pick up their stuff from you. But here's the rub. How many people do you know, realistically, who are going to sign up to buy soap from you, or food bars, or whatever else it is that Amway sells? Chances are pretty good that if you ever succeed at recruiting anyone else into the business,
Oh my god, you're not attacking, are you?
monolithically what Amway distributors call it, you'll quickly run out of people to hustle. So if you want to stay in, it will be just you, your AMC Pacer, and a couple of boxes of soap that you bought from your friend. In 1980, the Wisconsin Attorney General crunched the numbers of the top 1% of Amway distributors in that state to see what they really made. The result was shocking. Though most of those 1% did post a profit on paper, with operating costs deducted, almost every single one of them lost money on a net basis, with the average loss penciling out to $900. Now, this was the top 1% of all distributors in Wisconsin. Thus, an infinitesimal sliver of distributors actually made a profit. Your odds of winning at gambling in a casino are mathematically higher than they are at making money in Amway. So these are the basics of how Amway distributorships work. There are legions of documents, blogs, YouTube videos, and other content to demonstrate this. And indeed, this kind of material is the central focus of a majority of the anti-MLM community when they talk about Amway. That analysis is fundamentally correct. Chances are virtually certain that you will lose money becoming an Amway distributor or really in any multi-level marketing scheme. But the real story of this video goes deeper than that. It's the tools cult, which sort of hides behind the public face of the Amway experience. That is the next layer of context, and it's in the next chapter. So what is the tools business, and why is it sometimes referred to as a cult? You might think tools refers to hammers or wrenches or rakes or something. Not in this context. In describing how Amway works, remember I said back in the bell-bottom Jimmy Carter 1970s, you'd just been hustled by your friend to become an Amway distributor. And after he's tantalized you with illusory promises of all the wealth you'll enjoy by recruiting other people to sell soap, you load the Amway starter pack into the back of your AMC Pacer. Now that box contains soap samples, obviously, but it also contains something else. In the 1970s, a newly recruited distributor or independent business owner would find in that box a couple of books, such as The Possible Dream by Charles Paul Kahn, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz, and Don't Let Anyone Steal Your Dream by a fellow named Dexter Yeager. Also included would be a couple of cassette tapes. Pop one of those tapes into your cassette player on the drive home from your friend's house, assuming that your AMC Pacer is posh enough to have a cassette player, and out of the speakers will come a man's voice.
What?
Talking about how you have to seize your dreams and envision success in order to
Why
make
can't
it.
I see him?
What's your pin gonna be?
Why can't I see him?
Diamond!
It's so annoying.
Diamond! Believe in Diamond. This business is for winners. When you drive up in your brand new coach, flashing the jewelry, your wife in a new fur coat, you'll know why you worked so hard. You'll know why you're diamond.
Those are the tools. Tapes, books, and also live seminars and rallies, all of them of a motivational nature. Later, as the tools system became more sophisticated, the tools would eventually include things like a special voicemail system called Amvox. But as our paradigm case is in the 1970s, let's stick with books, tapes, seminars, and rallies. In Amway parlance, they're known sometimes as BSMs, or business support materials. What the tools are supposed to do is to help Amway distributors recruit people to sell soap and also other trinkets that the Amway Corporation manufactures, such as food bars and energy drinks and other incidental merchandise. But the big deal is to recruit. show the plan, draw circles. That's the lifeblood of the Amway business. And that's also the definition of multi-level marketing. Those tools are supposed to motivate you to succeed. So just to be clear, your buddy who got you into Amway will never explicitly require you to buy the tapes. But he might, and probably will, say something like this. Quote, "I want to help you in every way I can. It would be a disservice not to sell you the tapes and books and tickets. Hey, you'll be moving dozens of these down through your organization in a few months." In practice, the purchase of the tapes and books and seminar tickets isn't really optional. The fiction that it is a fig leaf to confer a veneer of legality on what would otherwise be an illegal business. Even the Amway Corporation itself documented the pressure put on distributors to buy the tools. If they didn't, the uplines would refuse to associate with them, which would kill their businesses. In the 1980s and into the 90s, the tapes cost $5 a piece and were often pre-sold to Amway distributors by an arrangement known as the standing order. This meant that the distributor agreed to buy a tape, usually once a week, every week, regardless of what it was, until the order was canceled, which it would almost never be. In fact, the tools business was even more rapacious than that. One of the kingpins of the tools business, Doug Weed, who features prominently in the later part of this story, said that the wife of a fellow kingpin, Betty Jo Renfro, once upbraided him for talking at an Amway rally about the quote-unquote tape of the week. According to Weed, Renfro said to him, quote, "Don't you ever talk about the tape of the week to our group. We move more than one tape a week. We have the tape of the day or the tape of the hour," end quote. So remember, these tapes were selling for $5 a piece, circa 1980. $5 in 1980 is about $17 in today's money. The markup on these tapes was colossal. They cost about 60 cents a piece to make. Tapes were not just sold to distributors through the usual process of distributing products to their downlines, that procedure of driving to your friend's house to pick up your order. They were also sold at rallies and seminars themselves. Kingpins would set up tables at the entrances to these rallies, often in large hotel ballrooms or in some cases stadiums or sports venues, and offer all the latest tapes at a huge markup. Much of the time, these materials sold out. Distributors buying them, distributors who were attending the rallies, who just had to have that little extra dose of motivation. Table sales of tapes and books at Amway rallies could yield the kingpins as much as $10,000 a night in cash. That's big, big money. In fact, it's far more money than the pittance that distributors are making by selling soap to one another. Thus, what we're really talking about here is two businesses. The first is the Amway business itself, which is dependent on drawing circles and showing the plan to gain a never-ending stream of recruits who buy products like LOC, soap, and SA8, also soap, and those profits inure to the benefit of the Amway Corporation, who's the manufacturer of those products. The second business is the sale of tools to Amway distributors. Although these businesses are related, they are separate. The ownership, control, and profits of the Amway Corporation, which manufactures soap and other products, are within the hands of a different group of people than the ownership, control, and profits of the tool businesses, even if the people from whom each of those businesses makes their profits are generally the same people. So here's where we get into the theoretical structures of these organizations. Now, in 2022, thanks largely to the works of the MLM movement, most people understand that multi-level marketing operations are functionally the same as pyramid schemes. Amway takes care to stress that according to a Federal Trade Commission ruling from 1979, which I'm going to be talking about, that it is not a pyramid scheme. But the difference between what the FTC defined in that decision as a pyramid scheme in 1979 and whatever Amway is an extremely fine and technical one. The distinction is based on whether any of the products are actually sold to people outside the organization. In fact, that's a rule set by that 1979 decision that Amway has to abide by. In reality, though, only a tiny proportion of the products that Amway manufactures ever actually wind up in the hands of people outside the various Amway organizations. This is why people argue, convincingly in my view, that it is functionally the same as a pyramid scheme. In 1983, as we'll see, the Amway Corporation itself declared that the tools business is an actual pyramid scheme under the terms of that 1979 FTC decision, and that it was a blatantly illegal one. That's in the Postma memo, which I'll cover in Chapter 8. So I know I've talked a lot and it's probably a bit confusing. Here is one way to envision these businesses and their relationship. Imagine two pyramids, not exactly one nested inside the other, but they have significant overlap. One pyramid, representing the Amway MLM business, is much smaller than the other. The second pyramid, much larger, is the tools cult. In visual representation, it's semi-transparent because it gets noticed a lot less. Or from a distance, people sometimes assume that it's a reflection or a shadow of the smaller pyramid. Although these two pyramids are symbiotic, and in fact neither can exist without the other, they are separate. They're under separate ownership and separate leadership. The relationship between them has been historically acrimonious. They don't like each other very much, but each one recognizes the other as a necessary evil. Most discussion of Amway in the anti-MLM space focuses on the smaller, more visible pyramid, the one that relies on recruiting and which makes most of its money selling products to Amway distributors. The major questions about how much money a typical Amway distributor makes, whether the promises of income are plausible, that sort of thing, all of that focuses on that smaller pyramid. The 1979 FTC ruling, which Amway has for decades trumpeted as the seal of legality and approval, pertains solely to the smaller pyramid. Yet when people talk about Amway being a cult or cult-like, what they're really talking about is the larger pyramid, the tools cult. Here's where most of the money is, and a lot of the abuses.
The horn is really annoying me.
It's
Please
best to
stop
describe
doing
the
that.
legality of this as untested. The tools business has not been declared legal by the FTC, nor has it been declared illegal. Even a lot of anti-MLM people assume, at least at first, that these pyramids are congruous, and that Amway is a monolithic
Your skill has increased.
phenomenon. They're not, and it isn't. So what is the tools business really selling? Surprisingly little, to be honest. If you've ever heard one of these tapes, you've basically heard them all. There's a lot of motivational talk about envisioning your dreams, and especially fantasizing about how rich you will eventually become by being an Amway distributor. Furthermore, these tapes are often made by simply recording motivational speeches given from the stage at rallies, so it kind of resembles an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. The rallies themselves were and are bizarre experiences, rife with pageantry and populist hysteria, at which Amway stars, the diamonds, the tool kingpins, mostly, especially Dexter Yeager, would be fated like conquering Roman emperors or rock stars. One especially fervent Yeager rally in 1980 ended with Amway distributors spilling out into the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina at 3 o'clock in the morning, chanting in unison, 5 and 6 nights a week, 5 and 6 nights a week. That means the number of nights that they intend to go out and draw circles for Amway. I referred to the diamonds a moment ago. Now this is an important concept. There's a complex hierarchy of pin levels in Amway, all named after various jewels. Supposedly, as you move up in the organization and quote-unquote go direct, meaning you've ordered enough products that you don't have to drive over to your friend's house in your AMC Pacer, but you can order directly from Amway, you might then become a pearl, or a ruby, or an emerald, or the brass ring, diamond. It doesn't matter the exact order of the levels, but diamond is the ultimate. Well, at least it was at first, before Amway had to invent higher levels as the Kingpin's businesses grew. Amway distributors would speak in glowing terms of going diamond, which was a euphemism for financial success. When are you going diamond? As if it's a foregone conclusion, a matter of time, which the motivational psychobabble of the tools constantly reinforced. Indeed, the tools and rallies contain precious little advice on actually how to sell these products. Usually, they just talk in vague terms about how many material possessions you'll have, Cadillacs and boats and mansions and fur coats once you go diamond. But think about this, how much motivation does a soap salesperson really need? It would be one thing if the tools were actually sales advice or training, but they're not. It's just variations of what color Cadillac do you want? Despite their mostly lack of content, the tools proved highly addictive. Numerous apostates from the tools cult have reported, year after year, decade after decade, that constant exposure to tapes and rallies produced a behavior-altering effect that changed their thinking, and in many cases, emptied it. Listening to tapes recorded at rallies was intended to reproduce the euphoric effect of attending those rallies. Whenever your faith in the Amway dream falters, just listen to a tape and get roped back into the fold. Soon enough, you'll be back running through the streets at 3 a.m. chanting 5 and 6 nights a week. This is why people refer to Amway as a cult. They're not really referring to the Amway Corporation, which, as you recall, sells soap and other products. They're referring to the tools business, its closed and coercive nature, and its behavior-altering effects, which have been well documented. The very vapidity and lack of substance in the tools themselves is a dead giveaway that they're not and never were actual business support materials. They're not about helping Amway distributors succeed at selling soap and other products, which over 99% of them won't anyway, regardless of circumstances. Therefore, there has to be another motive. There is. (1964). The Beatles are taking America by storm. Racial segregation is banned in the United States, at least in theory. Lyndon Johnson is running for a full term as president, and Julie Andrews is flying across movie screens on her umbrella. Also that year, a man named Dexter Yeager becomes one of the early distributors in Amway, a company which at that point is really only about 5 years old. As a historian, finding the true story of Dexter Yeager's life reminds me of nothing so much as researching the biographies of medieval saints. So many layers of hagiography, much of it spun by Yeager himself, surround his life story that it's almost impossible to separate fact from fiction. What we do know is that he was born in 1939 in the small town of Rome, New York, which 60 years later would become the infamous setting of Woodstock 99. But anyway, long before that, the Yeager family lived there, and they were evidently poor. Much of the hagiography that Yeager generated about himself in later life stressed this early poverty. It also emphasized the narrative that he was some sort of born salesman. He claimed that while he was in the 6th grade, that he sold bottles of soda to construction workers for a dime apiece, and then raised his profits by buying Coke wholesale. Personally, I doubt this anecdote. I suppose it could have happened. Yeager definitely was a good salesman, but this is a classic example of the sort of born salesman origin story that was extremely popular in the culture of salespeople in the mid-20th century, especially the 1960s. Being able to say that you were a successful salesman as a kid, especially for someone who became rich in a sales profession later in life, was the entry ticket to the kind of glowing Horatio Alger story that many salespeople in this era wanted to emulate. Dexter Yeager's life story, as he often told it, was a tale of quasi-religious redemption by the light of the Amway miracle. Supposedly, he sold tools, the real kind from Sears. He was a car salesman and a beer salesman with an outfit called the West End Brewery, and also, according to his own story, he was, once upon a time, a heavy drinker. What Yeager did not emphasize in his own biography was that after he became an Amway distributor in 1964, he didn't make much money at it. Despite going direct very quickly, and despite him saying, quote, "I ate, slept, and breathed the business 7 days a week," we know Yeager wasn't making money at Amway because within 3 years he was out applying for other jobs. This is actually a pretty damning fact, because this was only a couple of years after Amway really started its MLM operations. How can one of the earliest adopters of Amway not make money at it? This is evidence that the business model was already financially exhausted within about 5 years. There just wasn't enough money in, quote, the plan to sustain people with full-time incomes. Something that was still the case in 1983 when one of the tools kingpins complained about that fact in a remark that was caught on tape. Then, sometime in the mid-1960s, probably 1966, someone, possibly Fred Hansen, who was apparently one of the original Amway distributors sponsored in the 50s by Rich DeVos, but someone loaned Yeager a copy of Earl Nightingale's 1956 spoken word record, The Strangest Secret. This was the earliest motivational tape, and it was a big fad in the 1960s. Nightingale was himself inspired by Napoleon Hill, an author who wrote Think and Grow Rich in 1937, which would later be at the top of the classic Amway reading list. Napoleon Hill was in fact a con man with a long string of failed businesses, but he was riding the first wave of motivation and self-help that came out of the 1930s. This was the same cultural phenomenon that gave us Dale Carnegie's manipulative classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, which inspired, among others, Charles Manson. Another follower of Napoleon Hill was conservative evangelical preacher Norman Vincent Peale, in whose New York congregation was the Trump family. Yes, that Trump. Fall 1966. The United States is now deeply and directly involved in the Vietnam War. Star Trek premieres on NBC television, and at this time, Yeager sponsors Tony Renard into Amway. Renard also has an interest in Earl Nightingale's recordings. Renard buys a second-hand tape recorder from Yeager and then begins duplicating motivational tapes. By the late 1960s, motivational tapes are moving through Yeager's downline. At first, they're not a profit center. However, similar things are happening with other proto-MLMs. Both Holiday Magic and Coscott Interplanetary, two early multi-level marketing scams, are also beginning to develop motivational divisions. The Amway Corporation itself also has a small operation of motivational stuff. 1969, Richard Nixon becomes president, humans walk on the moon, and the aforementioned Charles Manson puts some of that Dale Carnegie energy into practice. Also that year, Dexter Yeager and family, his wife Bertie and 4 kids, eventually 7, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, probably to be closer to important people in his downline. Charlotte, as you'll see, rapidly becomes center stage of our story. 1970, a man named Bill Britt joins Amway. If you think the truth of Yeager's life is hard to pin down, Britt is even more of a black box, with virtually every mention of him in the historical record surrounded by cocoons of salesman and motivational biography. What we do know about Britt is that he served in the Army in the Korean War, and he was a minor official in a few municipal governments in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. In 1970, the year the Beatles break up and the year Nixon starts bombing Cambodia, Britt is sponsored into Amway by Dominic Coneguiliaro, whose sponsor was Dexter Yeager. These upline-downline relationships are very similar to family genealogies. Another reason why Amway organizations resemble the structure of the mafia. Sometime after 1970, but probably not long after, the true origin of the tools business begins. Here are the exact words of the source that we have for this, which was written by Doug Weed, who I'll profile in Chapter 6. Quote, "Then a bright young man, who will remain nameless, changed everything. He sat across from Dexter Yeager and Bill Britt in the coffee shop of the Fontainebleau Hotel and told Yeager that for a $50,000 investment, he could buy the latest machinery and set up his own tape duplicating company. Dexter turned him down. Britt said, "I'll do it." And so the modern networking tape business was born. End quote. Who was the bright young man who shall remain nameless? We don't know. It could theoretically have been Weed himself. He did sometimes talk about himself that way. But Weed was only 24 in 1970, and by most accounts, he didn't meet Dexter Yeager until later in the 70s. So the identity of this person who was there at the conception of the tools business remains unknown. But the point is that by this time, 1970 or 71, somebody, this nameless person, had noticed that there was enough profit potential in the tools themselves to offer a significant return on a $50,000 investment. $50,000 in 1970 was about $371,000 in today's money. This was also the time that cassette tapes were becoming ubiquitous. It all lines up. So Britt begins manufacturing tapes on a mass basis, and Yeager begins distributing them throughout his downlines. Britt seems to have offered Yeager a sweetheart deal on producing tapes for wholesale. Within a few short years, they both grow very rich and highly influential in the Amway organization. So now, for at least this small group of men, principally Bill Britt, Dexter Yeager, and the nameless young man, the central problem of the Amway business, which is that you can't make any real money at it, has been solved. Based on the work of self-help grifters like Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Norman Vincent Peale, and Earl Nightingale, they've discovered an entirely new and fabulously lucrative income stream to
You've been
replace
examined.
the largely illusory income that they should have been earning from recruiting people to sell Amway products. Was this discovery an accident? We can't know because there are so few primary sources. But it may not have come entirely out of left field. The Amway Tools cult, as it developed, is fairly unique, but it bears some significant similarities to other motivational organizations and ideologies that were developing around this same time, organizations that were also likened to cults. That is where we turn next. In 1964, the same year that Dexter Yeager got into Amway, a man named William Penn Patrick founded a cosmetic sales company called Holiday Magic, Inc. Using the Amway multi-level marketing model, Patrick sold distributorships in Holiday Magic, which was one of the early and infamous multi-level marketing pyramid schemes. But even the sale of distributorships and cosmetics eventually took a backseat to Patrick's true business, which was selling motivation. In 1967, Patrick founded Leadership Dynamics, a for-profit company that pioneered the technique of large group awareness training. Patrick also had a financial stake in a similar company called Mind Dynamics, which had been founded by his mentor, Alexander Everett. The ideology of these groups was highly similar to the kind of motivational material made popular by Earl Nightingale, Dexter Yeager's spiritual mentor. Mind Dynamics was also referred to as a cult, subjecting its members to humiliation, verbal and physical abuse, and even being locked into coffins. This company was the subject of a notorious 1972 book-length expose. While in the meantime, Holiday Magic was being prosecuted by the state of California, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the FTC for being an illegal pyramid scheme. These companies shut down after Patrick's death in 1973. The story of William Penn Patrick illustrates an early connection between multi-level marketing and ultra-conservatism.
Your skill has increased.
Patrick was a member of the infamous John Birch Society, which has also been likened to a cult. This is a far-right organization that believes in a worldwide communist conspiracy. The modern conspiracy theory cult, QAnon, has a lot of intellectual roots, if you can call them that, in common with the John
Your skill
Birch
has
Society.
increased.
John Schaefer, the former lead singer of heavy metal band Iced Earth, who went to prison for his participation in the January 6, 2021 insurrection at the Capitol, told the media that his anti-government views were heavily shaped by his father, who had been a longtime member of the John Birch Society. But anyway, back to the motivational cults of the 60s and 70s.
Oh yeah, I made burritos.
For a time, an employee of William Penn Patrick's holiday magic scheme was one Glenn W. Turner, who went on to found his own multi-level marketing pyramid, the infamous Coscot Interplanetary Inc. Coscot, like holiday magic, ostensibly also sold cosmetics. The name was apparently
Your skill has
meant to
increased.
reference both the word cosmetics and Florida's soon-to-be-built City of the Future, Epcot Center, with the word interplanetary added to give it a futuristic feel. In 1969, the year Dexter Yeager moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, Turner founded a company called Dare to be Great, Inc., with an exclamation point. Based in Orlando, the home territory of Epcot Center, then in the early stages of development, Dare to be Great, exclamation point, sold a series of self-motivation courses provided mostly
Your
on
skill has
cassette
increased.
tapes. The courses were graduated and increasingly more expensive, from Adventure Roman numeral 1 to Adventure Roman numeral 4. The resemblance to Scientology's operating Thetan levels is probably not a coincidence.
Your skill
But to
has
get through
increased.
all four would cost the customer $8,000, the equivalent of over $61,000 in today's money. What was the basic message
Your
of
skill
all
has
these
increased.
expensive adventure courses bellowed at the customer on tapes in Glenn W. Turner's classic Southern twang? Well, here's a quote from one of them.
Your skill has increased.
All things are possible to him who believes. What does it take to be a success? Believing in yourself. Making $1 million was easy. What was the hardest thing in the world? Believing I could do it. End quote. If this
Your skill
sounds
has increased.
remarkably like the message Dexter Yeager began pushing only a few years later, it should. Glenn W. Turner amassed a fortune of $150
Your skill has
million
increased.
selling Dare to be Great, exclamation point, on the multi-level pyramid model. It didn't last. Coscot Interplanetary was driven out of business by the FTC in 1975 for being, you guessed it, an illegal pyramid scheme. But not before tarring
Your skill has
celebrity
increased.
lawyer F. Lee Bailey, the lawyer later was partially responsible for freeing double murderer O.J. Simpson. Bailey was indicted on conspiracy
skill has
charges
increased.
related to Coscot Interplanetary, together with Glenn Turner, in 1973. That case ended in a hung jury. Turner eventually went to prison in 1987 for running a different pyramid scheme. He died in 2020. So why is any of this relevant to the Amway Tools cult? Well, several reasons. First, the Coscot experience in particular demonstrates that there was significant profit potential in selling motivation as a commodity, particularly in the medium of cassette tapes, and seminars and rallies too, both of which Holiday Magic and Coscot also had. There's a natural affinity, for whatever reason, between multi-level pyramid marketing and motivational material that often has a cult-like effect. Second, the connections between motivational cults, multi-level marketing, and far-right politics are also evident in the stories of these early multi-level marketing schemes. Nearly all of the Tools cult kingpins would turn out to be conservative evangelical Republicans, especially Dexter Yeager, which has far-reaching consequences, as we'll see in Chapter 11. Third, so long as we're talking about connections, there are numerous layers of connections between these organizations and others in what you might call the human potential movement of the 1970s. These included Erhard Seminars Training, or EST, as it was called, founded by Werner Erhard, who was involved in Mind Dynamics, the sister corporation of Holiday Magic. While it seems bizarre now, for a time the Church of Scientology was popularly believed to be a part of this movement. And this stuff was everywhere in the 70s. Est even showed up in the 1978 musical film The Wiz, the all-black remake of The Wizard of Oz. This ideology was imported into the production by Diana Ross, who was a fervent follower of Werner Erhard. And the final reason why this is relevant, several former Coscot distributors eventually joined Amway, and some apparently became Tools cult kingpins. The reason we know this is because Coscot is mentioned casually on the Miami Showdown tape from 1983, demonstrating that the kingpins were fully aware of it. recall the main thread of our story before we got into the digression of holiday magic, Coscott Interplanetary, and the other motivational cults of the 70s. Dexter Yeager and Bill Britt had struck it big in the tape business after a fateful meeting sometime in 1970 or 1971 at Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Hotel, an equally fateful location as we'll see. And at this meeting, a quote-unquote young man who will remain nameless suggested to Britt that he invest $50,000 in the tape duplicating business. The source for that account was one Douglas Weed, that's spelled W-E-A-D, who is a fascinating chameleon-like figure weaving his way in and out of this story. It's worth taking a few minutes to explain who Doug Weed was, because he's the glue that connects so many aspects of this story. Amway, the tools kingpins, the religious right, the Republican Party, and a certain prominent political family, from which two of our recent U.S. presidents have come. Doug Weed, now deceased, was your quintessential boomer. He was born in Indiana in 1946. A lifelong Pentecostal and Assemblies of God preacher, Weed started to become prominent as a motivational speaker in the mid-1970s, which is apparently how he came to the attention of various Amway personalities, including Dexter Yeager. Weed was employed by Yeager as his assistant, press agent, and ghostwriter. They co-authored numerous motivational books that were pushed out as tools to Amway distributors, and Weed probably wrote the first book under Yeager's byline, the 1978 classic, Don't Let Anybody Steal Your Dream. I read this book in preparation for making this video. It is an absolute nothing burger in terms of content, but it is completely reflective of the cultic style of tapes and rallies, which was big business by that time. Doug Weed, in fact, was the person who coined the phrase compassionate capitalism, which was later used by Amway corporate co-founder Rich DeVos as the title of his 1994 book, which incidentally was marketed heavily to Amway distributors. You may recall that phrase, compassionate capitalism, because it resurfaced 6 years later as a major theme of George W. Bush's 2000 presidential campaign. That is the influence that Doug Weed eventually had on the Republican Party. So how did he get that influence? Well, by 1980, Weed was wired into the Republican Party establishment and vice versa, through the channel of Amway and Dexter Yeager. Weed wrote a quickie biography of Ronald Reagan titled Reagan in Pursuit of the Presidency. The book is dedicated to, this should come as no surprise, Dexter Yeager. Yeager, in fact, brought then-candidate Reagan to speak at a massive Amway rally on Yeager's home turf in Charlotte, North Carolina in the late summer of 1980. Weed was apparently not yet an Amway distributor at that time, but he became one in or around 1981 when Ronald Reagan...
Your skill has increased.
Reagan brought with him to the White House, or at least to Blair House, former Texas oil man and Republican Party chairman George Bush. That would be Bush the First, whom Reagan didn't like very much, and with whom he frequently clashed in the early days of the 1980 campaign. Somehow, Weed
Your skill
became
has
close
increased.
to the Bush family, and at one point reported both to the elder Bush and the younger one, the then vice president's son. Weed was unquestionably a tools cult kingpin. As we'll see in Chapter 9,
Your skill has increased.
Again at the Miami Beach Fontainebleau
Unquestionably,
Hotel,
a
showdown meeting
tools
in
cult
April
kingpin.
1983 between the tools cult kingpins and Amway corporate representatives. We know that Weed was there because his voice is on the tape. However, Weed did not actually work at the White House until Bush the First got there in 1989 in his own right. Weed
Your skill has
gave
increased.
up his Amway distributorship at that time and then served as the conduit between the religious right and the Bush family. He was cashiered from the White House in 1990 when he objected to Bush inviting LGBT activists to the White House to the signing of a federal hate crimes bill. Though Weed insisted he was not personally homophobic, gee, where have we heard that one before, his opposition to soiling the sacred White House with gay people earned him significant cachet with the homophobic wing of the Republican Party. 2 years later, Weed popped up in Arizona, running for a newly created U.S. congressional seat. He won the Republican nomination, but then the elder statesman of Arizona Republican politics, retired Senator and former
no.
1964 presidential candidate Barry Goldwater shocked the state by endorsing Weed's Democratic opponent instead of him. She went on to win. Weed insisted that it was about abortion, but there might have been something else going on here. Goldwater was notoriously skeptical of the religious right, as he stated in no uncertain terms in 1994.
Nice,
when
you
he
got
warned
him.
that
Good job.
If and when preachers got control of the Republican Party, quote, it's going to be a terrible damn problem, end quote. So with his own career in elected office apparently scotched, Weed went on to advise the Bush family, and particularly Bush II. This eventually got him into
Bush
some
the
hot
second.
water. Weed secretly taped phone conversations
Bush
between
the
himself
second.
and George W. Bush, while the latter was still doing
Bush the second. I never thought about it that way, but that's pretty much what it is. It's Bush the second. It's the same old bullshit that we tried to get away from in England when we came here. It's the same old King of England in your face. It's Bush the second. That was what he was. It was Bush the second, and he sucked. He sucked. His father was an idiot.
Your skill has increased.
So was he. I can't do anything. I am not able to do anything. Oh, thank God. Okay, get on him. All I should do, all I really have to do is get another blink up and just keep charming. I seem to be able to keep the extra ray up somehow. I don't know how. But yeah, kill the crawler. Yeah. These things are doing massive amounts of damage to each other. It reminds me of like... like, it's weird. There's this point where these fucking creatures hitting each other in this RPG, it starts to feel like Godzilla, kind of. Like, the way they're smacking each other around with these huge numbers. You're like, man, you guys really are in, like, a goddamn boxing match. You know? Like a fucking chess boxing match. And the X-Ray is, like, is holding his own. Gotta retarget the X-Ray because he's the more scary one. Tame is not up for a long time. I should be alright. I mean, I keep getting mana, and that's good. I can just keep healing, I think. It's really tense, but I like it. It's fun. It's tense, but it's fun. Alright, get up. Charm. Good. Now get on him. Good, now. Oh, you gave me paralyze, you son of a bitch. How did you paralyze me? Oh, no, the X-Ray dumped his fucking paralyze on me like an asshole. What do you mean? Paralyze the Paralina. Paralina the paralyzed. Blah. Okay, get the regen up. I actually like this. It's very tense. It's like a really tense Pokemon match that you can't really pause. You definitely cannot pause this. The only pause in this is death. That's it. It's the only way to pause this is death. Damn it, you just had to poison me, you fucking dick. I gotta get behind the crawler. Oh, he killed him though. Man, this X-Ray, he had big dick. He, like, really took on these fucking mobs, like, pretty well. Yeah, get on that thing and just fight that for a while. Yeah. Oh, no, he linked. Oh, well, I'm not that scared of this, I don't think. I mean, I might die here, but whatever. I got the XP to pay for the death.
Your skill has
increased. Oh, my God, the
increased.
X-Ray decharmed. Okay, so get on the Hornfly. Get on the Hornfly. I got the link dealt with somehow. Look at that. I somehow dealt with the link. Do you see how pimp that was? The D-charm depopped the link. It was actually so pro. As far as fucking Final Fantasy goes. Fucking tense, man. You're freaking me out, man. Okay, I know you're gonna die here. That's okay. Get the Hornfly. I didn't get him.
Your skill has
very
increased.
bad. It's bad. Run. Stupid Hornfly. I didn't get a blink up. Go. Get him, charm him. Yes, I got him. It's mine now. All right, I'm just going to go sick him on something else until I have something else to get. And in the whole meantime, I'm just learning BST better, and I'm up, and I'm getting XP every once in a while when I get a kill. And the X-Ray's off me now. There's Shadow Tag. He appears to be dying. I have enough mana to give him a regen and a cure 2. I have a divine seal. I could save him. I did save him, I think. He recharmed. Yeah, nice. Yeah, don't die. Yeah, fucking freaky, man. I gotta dump this fly on something. I'm gonna do it here. Get on that fly. Stay away from me. The Exo's gonna pop. I did my good deed. Whatever. I gave him help. I pretty much stopped it. I stopped it. Okay, so now we will change this to just FFXI Horizon for the moment, and I will do BST. Yeah, BST. Yep. And save Twitch. Save Twitch. And there we go. And cool. Hey, 8 views. Doing better. Doing better.
Between himself and
Hi guys,
George
I love
W.
you.
Bush, while the latter was still governor of Texas. In 2005, when Bush II was president, Weed released these tapes, which he thought were made legally.
Bush II.
But some of the revelations on them angered various conservatives and annoyed the Bushes themselves. Ironic, isn't it, that the man so prominent in the hierarchy of a cult that holds its members in sway through the use of cassette tapes is himself brought down by tapes. Now persona non grata in the Bush camp, Weed went on to advise another political family, that being the Pauls, Father Ron and son Rand, and he went on to write several books on presidential history, none of which, in my opinion as a historian, are any good at all. It's unfortunate that Weed is the only source
Wow,
we
you're
have,
still
or at least
fighting,
that
I
I've been
forgot.
able to find for
Yeah.
that early critical 1970s meeting
Shit,
between
yeah, kill that
Yeager,
fly.
Witt, and the right young man. While I believe that the factual matters that Weed attests to in this account are probably correct, he is a bit unreliable because of his spin. The reporting
get
on
this soldier
Weed,
crawler, I swear to God
particularly
I will.
Ward Harkavi's series of stories, which I linked earlier in a footnote, makes clear that he was famously a chameleon, not wanting to say anything to offend anybody, and not above sandbagging the truth to that end. I discovered the origin story of the Tools cult in writings on Weed's blog, dated 2004. This is a time when he was arguing online with various anti-MMO
I got him.
Weed's take on the whole phenomenon was basically tools
Weed.
are valuable, but there's a few bad apples that have corrupted the whole system.
Damn bad apples.
That's a common defense of the Tools cult, particularly
Damn
among those
Tools
who are
cult.
unwilling to condemn the Amway system as a whole.
Damn Amway.
Weed, in any event, was never going to say publicly anything that wasn't generally laudatory of Amway and multi-level marketing. The unreliability of Doug Weed as a source is similar to doing medieval or ancient history, where there is one or only a handful of sources about a particular battle or event or reign, and all of the sources are unreliable or problematic. So as a historian, when confronted with this situation, you have to kind of read between the lines to arrive at some reasonable conclusion of what actually happened. So, with that out of the way, let's get back to the story of the Tools cult and their epic battle with the Amway Corporation, which reached a peak in 1983. 1975. Saigon falls to the North Vietnamese. Steven Spielberg's Jaws makes a generation of Americans afraid to go swimming. President Gerald Ford is shot at by Squeaky Fromm, a member of the Manson family, who was recruited using Dale Carnegie's manipulation techniques. And also in this year, the Amway Corporation begins its epic bruising battle with the Federal Trade Commission, a battle in which its survival as a company is at stake. By now, the FTC was on a roll, having lined up and shot down one multi-level marketing scam after another. They'd killed Holiday Magic and Coscott Interplanetary dog dead, and now they had their eyes on the biggest steer on the ranch, Amway, the OG MLM. Amway execs Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel had every reason to be concerned. Holiday Magic and Coscott had both been
Your skill has increased.
brazen in their get-rich-quick representations. But aside from that, It was difficult for Amway to distinguish its basic pyramid-shaped
Your skill has
business model
increased.
from
Damn it.
theirs.
All right.
But the Amway suits did have a secret weapon that Holliday and Coscott did not have: the President of the United States. Before Gerald Ford had the slightest inkling that he might one day be president, he was the longtime Republican congressman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, right next door to Amway founder's hometown of Ada. Ford only got the top job because Nixon's VP, Spiro Agnew, resigned during a bribery scandal. And according to the newly passed 25th Amendment, Nixon
I got him,
nominated and
and I
Congress
lived.
approved a new vice
I got
president,
through it.
and Ford was his choice. Then Nixon himself had his last day
Yeah,
in the final wave on the
143.
steps of Marine One as a result of the Watergate scandal. And suddenly, Grand Rapids' own congressman was in the White House.
Good sheep.
DeVos and Van Andel wasted no time exploiting their connection to Ford. They visited him privately in the White House. The notes from that conversation, if there ever were any, have never surfaced, but we know for a fact that they were there. In 1979, after 4 years of litigation, the infamous decision in re Amway Corporation was issued. If you ever want to hear a lengthy dissertation on this decision, just tell an MLM Hunbot that you think their outfit is a pyramid scheme. Then pull out a stopwatch and see how many seconds before they invoke the 1979 Amway decision as supposed proof of the legality of multi-level marketing. I'm fortunately going to spare you that lengthy diatribe, but I will say that I believe the Amway FTC decision, which declared that Amway is not a pyramid scheme, even though it pretty much is mischaracterized in anti-MLM circles. It was not the surprise ringing endorsement of Amway that it's often made out to be. The decision was a functional victory for Amway in that it kept them alive, and it specified certain safe harbor conditions, fig leaves mostly, that if they abided by them, would theoretically keep the company from getting broken up as an illegal pyramid scheme. In reality, though, there's evidence that the Amway suits understood that what they had really done, all they had really done,
Your skill
was to
has
fight
increased.
the FTC to a draw. If they crossed the very thin line that the FTC had drawn around their legal operations, the assault could be renewed again at any time.
I think I'm about to get
This may have been the
Rampage,
deal, explicitly
which is
or
so
implicitly,
awesome.
that the suits worked out with Ford during that mysterious White
Your
House
skill
meeting
has
in
increased.
1975. Or there might not have been a deal at all. We may never know. But the Amway Corporation continued to fear and dread the FTC for years afterward. So clearly they did not interpret the decision as a permanent absolution. Now that point becomes important later on. In the meantime, the tools cult kingpins were getting very, very rich in the later 1970s. They quickly became a very insular group. Less than 2% of Amway
Your skill has
distributors
increased.
participate in the profits from the tools business, and 98%
Oh God, I don't
are
know.
never even told that major profits were being made in that business. Furthermore, the kingpins could keep their club closed and insular by
Yes.
picking and choosing who was allowed to quote-unquote go diamond. They did this through transfers among themselves of the points that
Your skill has
conferred
increased.
Amway pin levels. By transferring points and creating or destroying new diamond distributors and their associated lines of business, the kingpins could effectively
fun.
make the ownership of the tools business sort of a walled garden, with only a choice group of insiders admitted to share its riches. Dexter Yeager was the biggest of the kingpins. He had the largest volume of Amway business of anybody. So how rich was Dexter Yeager? In 1980, the heyday of the tools business, Yeager had a mansion
tools
outside
business.
Charlotte to which Amway distributors flocked as a pilgrimage site, literally.
White
He had a
people are
collection
so
of
funny.
Rolls Royces, collection of yachts, a coach.
They're always on
a
about
bus
their
basically that he used
collections.
to transport himself ostentatiously to rallies, such as the immense Free Enterprise Days held at a sports arena in Charlotte. This is the rally where people broke
Your
into
skill
the
has
streets
increased.
chanting 5 and 6 nights a week. Now, all these trappings of prosperity, this is all part of the false image of success posed by the tapes and rallies themselves. It was all about material wealth. Notice that the message of the
Your
tools
skill has
is
increased.
never reflective or transformative. It's never get rich so you can go find some meaning in your life, or get rich and go to Nepal to find spiritual enlightenment or anything like that. It's always, here's the coach, boat, mansion, fur coat, whatever. This is the meaning in life. No deeper reflection required. This evidently reflected Dexter Yeager's
Your skill
personal
has
view
increased.
of wealth and accomplishment. Note how this is also exactly the vision of wealth that comes out of prosperity gospel preachers like the Osteen family. But the tools kingpins were very careful to promote
Your
the
skill has
impression,
increased.
not explicitly,
I'm
but
winning.
implicitly, to promote the impression
How am I
that
winning
their wealth
these?
came from
God
selling
damn, 110.
Amway products and
Yeah.
recruiting distributors, not the tools business. The message was,
Your
if you
inventory
work
is
hard
full.
at Amway,
All right, you.
again
Go.
universally referred to as the business, you too will own the coach, boat, mansion, and fur coats once you go diamond.
When you drive up in your brand new coach, flashing the jewelry, your wife in a new fur coat, you'll know why you worked so hard. You'll know why you're diamond.
Diamond.
Anecdotally, it was common lore among rank-and-file Amway distributors that one of the talking points was Amway produced more millionaires than any other business. Now, that is patently and quantifiably nonsense, of course, but it's a lie that's necessary to tell the distributors to keep them hooked. The truth, that any money that's made in Amway comes mostly from the tools cult, has to be carefully hidden.
Tools cult.
Even a couple of minutes logical reflection can
Tools
deflate
cult.
Amway's implicit promise of fabulous wealth.
Every time he says tools
Realistically,
cult.
how many soap millionaires can there be in America? And how can there be so many people who routinely get so rich selling a product that isn't even available in retail stores? The tools kingpins were very careful to keep people from asking these sorts of questions. The reality, of course, was that there were no soap millionaires, but there were tools cult millionaires. By 1990, Dexter Yeager was pulling in $30 million a year, and the vast majority of it came from tools. He flaunted his wealth by wearing diamond rings, a Rolex, and a bracelet spelling out his name in diamonds.
Nice.
Yeager had now set up a corporation, Freedom Distributing, which was the financial hub of his tools business. That company later in the 80s became Internet Services Corporation, and eventually his motivational tape empire spewed its cultic rantings, many of them from Yeager's own speeches at rallies, into all 50 states and 10 foreign countries. The enormous growth of the tools cult reached its apex during the time that the Amway Corporation was distracted by their long battle with the Federal Trade Commission. The historical evidence, particularly the Postma memo, supports the inference that the Amway suits were surprised by how big and how pervasive the tools business had become, dwarfing by many times the revenues made by selling Amway manufactured products to distributors. Or perhaps the suits did know or suspected, but chose to ignore the problem for as long as possible. If they did ignore it, you can understand why. After all, Yeager, Britt, and their associated downlines accounted for the lion's share of the Amway Corporation's profits. The real nature of Yeager's business was selling tapes, books, and rally tickets. The Amway Corporation didn't get a piece of
Nice,
that,
I won again.
but what revenue they did get could exist only so long as the tools kingpins, the diamonds, kept their downlines hooked on motivational tapes. Then, finally, events forced Amway to pull its head out of the sand. 1982. Ronald Reagan, having been shot by Hinckley the year before, has finally recovered. Michael Jackson is shattering all-time
Your
records
skill
with
has
the Thriller
increased.
album. Margaret Thatcher decides to fight for what tiny ice-encrusted
Get back to the
scraps of
tools
the British
way.
Empire would
I
leave
don't
above
care about
water
what Michael
in
Jackson's
Falklands War.
doing.
And
Your skill has
1982
increased.
is a terrible, terrible year for the Amway Corporation. Sales are slowing down. The press is increasingly abuzz with negative stories about
Abuzz.
Amway, especially its dissatisfied
Damn it, Amway.
distributors who keep talking about how weird and culty it is. One of these is Phil
Damn it, you're
Kearns,
weird and
author
culty.
of
Your skill
Fake
has
It Till You
increased.
Make It,
Amway.
the first book-length expose of Amway and the tools cult. Kearns, a
Fake it till
former
you make
distributor,
it.
ironically
Ugh.
once co-authored a book with none other than Doug Weed. It was about the People's Temple, the suicide cult that resulted in over 900 deaths in Guyana in November 1978. But what really draws the ire of the Amway suits is increasingly brazen behavior by some of the tools cult kingpins, or wannabe kingpins. Sometime
Your skill
in
has
late
increased.
1982, a West Coast distributor named Leonard Hall goes rogue. Now, I know very little about Leonard Hall, but what we do know, mostly from the Miami Showdown tape, speaks
Your
for
skill
itself.
has increased.
Hall apparently saw the money being made in the tools cult and tried to make
Tools
a grab
cult.
for some of it. Although the majority of Amway distributors were wired into
Your skill
Jaeger's
has
group,
increased.
not all of them were, and the tools were not ubiquitous in everybody's downline. So Hall may have sensed an opportunity and tried to make a bid to build a system, a mini tools cult, of his own, to cash in on the distributors who weren't already addicted to Jaeger's tools. He went up
Jaeger's
and down the
tools.
California coast, poaching distributors to join his line and thus getting them hooked on the tools.
Tools.
This is the ultimate sin
Hooked on
in the
tools.
Amway universe. It's called cross-lining. If we go back to the analogy of Amway being structured
Your
kind of
skill
like
has
a
increased.
mafia, cross-lining is like gangsters from one leg of the family going into business with another separate branch. This would be viewed by the Don as an
Your
act
skill
of
has increased.
disloyalty, and in any event, it would screw up the sanctity of the financial arrangements in the separate lines, which are insulated from each other. So if any one of them
Your
goes
skill
down,
has
it will affect
increased.
the others. So for this reason, cross-lining, the Amway Corporation, which does have some limited power to police its distributors, eventually terminated
Your skill
Leonard
has
Hall's
increased.
distributorship. Now, what
Nice,
happened in
got
this
another
case was
one.
apparently not the only time this kind of thing happened. I found cryptic references to something similar occurring in Hawaii about the same time. I'm not sure about that, I couldn't nail it down. But nevertheless, the attempts by the smaller fish distributors to leapfrog out of line and try to become tools kingpins themselves catches
Tools
the attention
kingpins.
of the Amway suits in Ada, Michigan. In late
I'll be right back.
1982, they commissioned a comprehensive internal study of the entire tools business.
Tools business.
This is how we get one of the most extraordinary documents in the entire history of multi-level marketing, the Postma Memo. On January 10th, 1983, an Amway company lawyer named Ed Postma, head of Amway's Business Conduct Division, sent a memo to Patrick Sullivan, Amway's Director of Sales for the Northwest region. The subject of the memo was analysis of the Brit/Jaeger system. This memo proves the animosity that existed between the Amway Corporation and the Jaeger Tools organization. Postma says, quote, "It is their feeling," meaning the Jaeger people, "that no one at the company completely relates to their efforts in attempting to build the business and the organization. There is a constant feeling of competition with the corporation." The memo contains several smoking gun phrases, such as this, quote, "In the words of one Diamond from the Northwest,
Oh
the
my
corporation
God.
should manufacture products and get out of the way. This sums up the extent of the relationship that
Wow.
these diamonds wish to have with the company. It has been my judgment, on observations, that they do not do a better meeting than we do, nor can they provide the same type of motivation as we do. However, in
Meeting.
attempting to convince the corporation to stay out of the motivation business, it allows them to do two things. First, it further
Your skill has
isolates the
increased.
business. Second, it allows them to operate a motivation business with little or no competition." End quote. Now, what Postma is referring to here, the same type of motivation we do, is the Amway Corporation's own very small library of motivational tapes. They did put out tapes and books occasionally, but their motivational operation was dwarfed by the Jaeger Brit tools operation. Postma continues, quote, "It becomes clear that although they, the Jaeger Diamonds, realize that they are Amway distributors,
Your
they
skill has
consider
increased.
their personal business to be the motivation tools business. I think there is little question that this is where the big money is made. The motivation business is
Your
also
skill has increased.
where their primary allegiance lies." End quote. There are numerous other gems from this memo. For instance, Postma dissects the rallies on which he estimates Jaeger rakes in $25,000 or $50,000 for a weekend, or $250,000 for free enterprise days. Postma also documents how there are vendors present at these rallies who rent jewelry, flashy clothes, and cars
Your skill has
for
increased.
diamond distributors to use at rallies to appear successful. This is a flat-out admission that the higher pins in Amway don't make the kind of money that they claim to make. And it's another layer of grift. The kingpins are making more money on renting swag to distributors
skill has
to
increased.
make them appear rich. Incidentally, this also corroborates the main thesis of Phil Kern's book, Fake It Till You Make It. That's what that phrase means, and also corroborates similar claims made later in the 1990s and 2000s by Eric Scheibler and Ruth Carter. Postma also says, direct quote, "The tool business is illegal. Although the Amway business is legal, the tools business is not. It is
The horn
a
is
pyramid."
really bad.
End quote. I don't know how much more comprehensive you get than that. This is the Amway Corporation declaring the Tools Cult an illegal pyramid scheme. The Postma memo was not the only internal expose of the Tools Cult. Slightly earlier, sometime in 1982, there was a document titled The Challenge of the 80s, which warned the Amway Policy Committee that the illegality of the tools business threatened the very existence of the Amway Corporation itself. In other words, they feared the FTC renewing the battle against them, a prospect which scared the hell
Your
out
skill
of the
has
Amway
increased.
since they couldn't control the behavior of the tools kingpins. I also found a reference to a warning issued by a federal district court in Ohio to the Amway Corporation, titled Amway Distributor Compliance with the Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct. Now, I couldn't find a copy of the original document itself, but another source that quoted it claimed that it said this, quote, "Widespread illegalities inherent in Amway distributor-designed systems of tapes, books, and rallies. While most of these systems were conceived in the late 1960s and early 1970s as genuine support programs, entrepreneurial higher pins discovered and developed programs for substantial, separate, additional income under the Amway umbrella." End quote. The hits kept coming for Amway. In early 1983, the news show 60 Minutes does an expose on Amway called
Your skill has
Silk and
increased.
Hope. Now, this is mostly about whether the income promises match up with reality, and it's also tangentially about the Tools Cult. In this show, Mike Wallace interviews Dexter Yeager and his wife,
so you
Bertie.
can just go
Surprisingly,
back.
Wallace
Yeah,
goes
just
fairly easy
leave.
on them and does not press the main issue, which is whether his income is from the tools business or the Amway business, a question which 60 Minutes leaves open-ended. Still, the 60 Minutes segment, and particularly the Leonard Hall debacle, evidently spook the Amway suits enough that they finally decide to take action. In January 1983, right after the Postma memo, founders Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel put out two of their own tapes called Directly Speaking. They are messages basically to the tools kingpins, the diamonds, generally, and the Yeager organization, particularly. In these tapes, the Amway suits warn the tools kingpins about going too far with the tools business, that it could call down the thunder on the whole Amway ecosystem. This is not explicitly stated, but it's probably what they mean, causing the FTC to renew the war against them. The Amway founders warn the kingpins about what's euphemistically called the curiosity approach, which is how they bait and switch people into in prospecting meetings by not telling them that they're signing up for Amway. But the big bombshell is this. Indirectly speaking, the suits announced that they're going to start counting Amway-approved tapes toward distributors' bonuses. What the diamonds take this to mean is that Amway is going to begin stepping up the business of its own tools to compete with the kingpins' tool businesses. This is nothing less than a declaration of war. Amway execs go coast to coast, visiting the kingpins who rage at them in meeting after meeting about how the corporation is trying to kill their business. The Amway suit's response is, no, you don't understand. What you're doing is illegal, and if the FTC or the courts get involved, they could destroy everything. There was apparently a big meeting in Hawaii to this effect, which is mentioned peripherally in various sources, including the Miami tape, but if a similar record of this meeting existed, it has unfortunately been lost to history. things finally come to a head at another fateful meeting between Amway corporate representatives and the Tools Kingpins. This meeting, a remarkable document of which has been preserved, is the climax of our story, the Miami Showdown.
I really like it when you do this music, it's really good.
Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Hotel, pronounced by the locals as Fountainbleu, is a famous local landmark. It was opened in 1955, was the site of a TV special with Frank Sinatra welcoming Elvis back from his tour in the Army, and was even featured in a James Bond movie. On April 5th, 1983, a Tuesday, Amway representatives, including Ron Lindebaum, Director of Sales for the Western Region, and Bob Abraham, an Amway company lawyer, met with a group of Tools Kingpins on an outdoor terrace of this hotel. Among the Kingpins in attendance were Jerry Herrera, who controlled much of the tools business in Puerto Rico, Ron Hale, who was directly downline of Dexter Yeager, Doug Weed, of course, and Dexter Yeager and his wife, Birdie. It's unclear how many people were there. A roster of attendees would be a very valuable thing, but I haven't found it. The ostensible purpose of the meeting was for the Amway corporate representatives to explain, or try to explain, to the Tools Kingpins the legal danger that they were putting themselves and the whole Amway ecosystem in by profiting so egregiously from the Tools cult. An ulterior motive may have been an entree by the Amway Corporation to try to find a way to share in the profits from that business. Certainly, the Kingpins perceived that that's what the suits were trying to do. This extraordinary meeting was caught on tape. Though no longer available on the live web, an early blogger critical of Amway posted the recordings on his website back in the 2000s, and most, but not all, of those recordings are still available on archive.org. This tape is, in my opinion, the most illuminating historical source we have about how MLMs work from the top down. To my knowledge, no other source like this exists. It's the equivalent of having a tape recording of a meeting of high-level mafia bosses discussing big strategy. Because there's a cone of silence around the top levels of MLMs, and because in Amway particularly they tend to be family businesses where no one talks and no one ever leaves, we have almost no other sources about how these things really work at this very high level.
I want to try and kill this water
The tape
elemental.
of the Miami Showdown
If I
is
die,
raw
I die.
and unedited. You can hear airplanes going by overhead, for instance. The meeting is acrimonious, particularly at the beginning. A bunch of people are shouting at each other. This is proof positive of the animosity between the ownership and policy heads of the two pyramids, the ostensibly legal Amway business and the legally untested Tools cult business. I'm going to play for you some of the most important bits.
I'm sensitive to it. They created two wars.
I'm sensitive
That's
to
why
it.
it looks like a smoke screen, because we get a rationale after the fact. Because he said the BV was never meant to be competitive, and on the last directly speaking tape, he says hopefully that'll create some competition. And so he's contradicting himself. So Ron, the corporation still tell us that these new rules, TV on tape, is not going to take away from your tape business. Then someone else from the company, or even the same person, that consistently says, we got a legal problem, that's why we got to take your tape business away.
We do have a legal problem, but we don't think it's going to take your tape business away or any other business. We do have a legal problem, but we don't think it's going to take your tape business away or any other business.
What you just heard are admissions that the Amway Corporation knew that most of the money was being made in the tools business. Doug Weed referred to BV on tapes. BV is an Amway term meaning business volume. It's part of how they calculate bonuses. But that reference refers to the Kingpin's fears that Amway is trying to get into the motivational tools business and squeeze the Kingpins
You
out.
cast it on me.
Here's some more.
What I'm hearing you say is the decision was made to start to reap some of the rewards of the tape business. I just got to say that is not why the decision was made to put BB on tapes.
Here's the response from an unidentified Kingpin.
But if it doesn't work, why split the company over? Either it'll work and you'll get our tape business.
Yeah, the guy in the sunglasses is going to clarify some of that.
And this is the true smoking gun. The the statement that proves that most of the Amway Corporation's profits are a result, indirectly, of the tools business.
Ron, can I say something here that I think that Doug and Jerry have said here with the tape business is the fact that the reason Amway is for 1.5 billion. And the reason it's going to go to 2.5 billion, when I got into Amway, it was 200 million. One of the biggest reasons it went from 200 million to 1.5 billion was seminars and was all the things in the Amway business, the seminars and rallies, the tapes, and so on that were voluntarily purchased and voluntarily
Your skill has increased.
by distributors. And all of a sudden, right now, we perceive the company strongly, whether it's Rich and Jay or whether it's the company as a whole, strongly coming down on these things. And like somebody said here, is Rich really shooting for 1.5 or 2.5 billion or 2.5 million? We're somewhat confused. And because does he really realize that it wasn't just the quality of the SAE that moved this business? And you and I have talked about this. SAE is a great product. But there's LLC is a great product. But it's not going to stand alone. It's a person. I got you. And this is what's coming out of it.
As much money as we can get through the tape system, there wouldn't have to, the money would be there to build it. There'd be incentive to build it, no money.
As much money as we can get through the tape business. There'd be an incentive there to build it, but there's no money. Then there's this exchange between Doug Weed, Yeager's protege, and Amway's lawyer, Bob Abraham.
Would it be illegal to put more money into
Stupid elemental.
No.
Put more money in the plan? Not to my knowledge. Is it, you got some kind of a hooker in that car?
No.
Do you think anyway to put more money in the plan?
The suggestion to put more money in the plan means, is it possible for the Amway Corporation to tinker with its system, its pyramid-shaped structure, to make the actual selling of products and recruitment more profitable, so that the kingpins wouldn't have to get rich selling books, tapes, and seminar tickets? But we know that can't happen, because if Amway tinkers
Incoming
with
tell.
their business plan, it runs the risk of crossing the very fine red lines that the FTC drew around it in that 1979 decision, which is the only thing that keeps the whole business technically legal. So, what's the fix? Ron Lindbaum, one of the Amway suits, says this, a directive that has clearly come from the lawyers and is based on the FTC decision.
Be sure to ensure that tools do not grow to
Your
such
skill
a
has
level
increased.
that they can no longer be described as reasonably related to the sale of the product to the ultimate consumer. What's reasonable? I don't, there's a whole bunch of parts to it here.
Why is this important? Because if the kingpins are making money from something other than the sale of products to end consumers, then they are involved in an illegal pyramid scheme. The FTC could renew its assault by claiming that Amway has violated the terms of that 1979 decision, and the whole enterprise could go the way of Coscott Interplanetary and Holiday Magic. This is what the Amway suits are afraid of. Late in the meeting, Amway's lawyer, Bob Abraham, stresses this point, but he also seizes the opportunity to make a political statement, which shows how the Amway Corporation and the kingpins view themselves in a societal context.
With this situation you can't give up your incomes because if you did it mean chapter 13
Keeps
or
poisoning me. It's so
how to
annoying.
satisfy Amway's desires.
Too late though. I got my tick,
They're
bitch.
running scared. And they are running scared. They're running scared because they're confronted with the enemy, and the enemy happens to be the liberals in this country at the moment that are in office.
The liberals in this country at the moment. Those liberals are out there having sex, and it bothers me. Bothers me. They're always getting high and having sex and having fun. It makes me really, really uncomfortable
Throughout
in my
the Miami
uptight
Showdown
ass.
meeting, Dexter Yeager is uncharacteristically
Goddamn
quiet.
hippies.
His wife Birdie speaks up more often than he does. But after a while, he does finally chime in with how he sees the situation. Here's that.
I think we're all right in the middle of it. The corporation's over here, and we're over here, and we feel that we got something
damn it, he
really
casts
going.
water
We can
god
work it
to
out,
that
we can
fucking
smooth it out,
dick.
we'll do whatever it takes to make it happen, as long as we can get back to having some kind of a love relationship and a mutual respect. And that seems to have been thrown aside by both sides, and we're almost acting like rejected lovers.
Oh,
Your
no.
skill has
The meeting is
increased.
cordial. The Kingpins
thank God.
praise and thank the Amway suits for coming.
Stop
and promise
spamming
they'll work
water
together,
god.
kumbaya, and all of that.
How do you have
It
all that
reminds me a bit
mana?
of the
You're
gangsters
so
embracing each other
annoying.
at the end of the summit meeting in The Godfather.
No.
There was another meeting later that same day at the same hotel.
No.
A much more scripted meeting. It was in a hotel ballroom, and it was between the Amway suits and the lower level Tools Club participants called the Emeralds.
Can't get him to stop
There are far
casting.
fewer juicy
It's so
revelations on
annoying.
that tape, probably because
He'll kill
that
me if
group
I get
operated at a
close.
lower level,
I gotta stay
and
away.
in any event, that tape is unfortunately incomplete. So what, if anything, was accomplished at the Miami showdown? Unfortunately, we don't know. The only way we know about the showdown itself was because this tape managed to surface back in the early 2000s. There must have been other meetings, other damning memos, but we haven't seen or heard of any of them. As I said early on, these organizations are as secretive as the mafia, with a cone of silence surrounding nearly everything.
That
they
tick
do.
is insane.
All we do know is the ultimate result of the battle between the Amway Corporation and the Tools cult Kingpins. The corporation surrendered. That's the subject of the next chapter.
Oh yeah, the 80s.
1988. Climate scientist Dr. James Hansen testifies before Congress that human-caused global
Fucking
warming
square.
is an advancing threat. Tom Cruise shakes up movie screens in Cocktail. Metallica puts out its And Justice for All album. George Bush I is elected president with the generous help of Doug Weed and numerous Amway distributors. And Amway co-founder Rich DeVos goes to court and makes a startling admission on the witness stand. By the
No,
late
no water
1980s,
too. No.
Lawsuits against Amway and the Tools
Oh,
called
you dirty
Kingpins were
bastard.
beginning to pile up. Most
What am I
were
gonna
filed
do
by
when you
Amway
kill him?
distributors
I'm gonna get
who
on the
sued
sheep,
their
I guess. I
former
gotta get ready.
uplines to try to get into the Tools cult business, to break into that walled garden, in other words. Some lawsuits were from former distributors who felt they'd been cheated by the Kingpins in one way or another, or who blamed the Amway Corporation for not reining them in. DeVos testified in one of these cases. From the sources, it's unclear exactly which one. But here is the Q&A from that proceeding. Question.
Don't
what happened
kill
in the area of the tools
me.
abuses?
No.
The private tools
No.
abuses addressed at that
No,
meeting.
don't
By
kill me
that meeting,
after
the
all
lawyer
of
is
this.
referring specifically
No,
to
don't
the
kill
Miami
me after
showdown.
all of this.
DeVos.
No.
Well, those abuses
No,
continue to this
no,
day.
stop.
There are a variety of people
Stop,
who complain to
stop.
me continually about some of
Not
those
the
abuses.
poison god,
So that's an
no.
ongoing challenge.
Got it,
that
poison
the
god, got it,
organization
poisona.
faces. I said to some of our staff there,
I
that
live
thought it would
somehow.
cost us
Fucking
a
kill
few
him.
$100
Kill him, you
million
dick.
dollars
Kill
in
him, kill
volume.
him.
I think I said
Oh my
300
God.
million as
You
we
are
went through
so
a correction
annoying.
phase. I think we lost upwards of 300 million in volume as we tried to go through this adjustment period. Question. It is a position that you took in the
Stupid
early
sheep
part of
can't kill him.
1983. Have you deviated from that position in the Amway Corporation since then with respect to your 10 points and the subject matter contained therein? DeVos's answer. Well, let's just say that we dealt with it the way we did. We did put some people under notice that they were doing things wrong. We pursued, of course, re-education, but we never pursued it to its ultimate
my God, you
goal
fucking
of
dick.
really nailing anything down. In the meantime, the volume came down, and we started to work at trying to hold
gonna
the
win,
business
you stupid
together,
Ellie.
But the problem persisted. in
Run!
Amway's.
No, it's a water god. Run,
This
run,
is
run,
all
run,
we really know about
Run.
Amway's surrender. But if you zoom out at a macro level, the
Run,
dynamics
run,
of the
run.
decision is clear. The Amway Corporation realized that a significant portion of their income came from the downlines
Come on,
of the
kill
Tools
him.
Kingpins.
He's got 3%
All of those distributors
HP.
hooked on tapes
Just
at rallies,
kill him. He's got
faithfully
2%.
buying
You're
LOC
so
and
annoying.
SA8 soap. Revenues were already declining in 1982 and 1983.
I'm gonna
Amway
win.
provoked
I'm
a
gonna
conflict
win.
with the
You're not
kingpins
casting it on me,
who
are you?
thought that the company was trying to
No,
horn
you
in
cast it
on
on
the
the sheep.
tools cult business.
Ha, ha.
Faced with a backlash
I'm gonna
at
win.
the Miami showdown,
I'm gonna win.
a decision was made at the highest level.
Your skill has
Oh,
increased.
God, run.
Maybe to issue a few warnings
Kill
here and
him.
there,
Yes.
but not really to follow through with them. After
Yes.
all, the company was already bleeding $200 to $300 million from
Your
what little
inventory
they
is full.
did try to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Evidently, the suits
I know.
decided that they couldn't risk heavier losses. And
Yeah,
what about
throw
the
that away.
FTC, that sword of Damocles that hung forever over this entire ecosystem of grift? Amway apparently decided that they simply had to hope for the best, hope that the FTC wouldn't renew the assault
I
and
win.
go after the pyramid scheme run by the kingpins. This gamble was probably reasonable when it was made in 1983, and certainly proved so over the succeeding decades. As both the Amway Corporation and the
Your
tools
inventory
cult
is full.
kingpins increased their wealth and their political power, they were able to not only insulate themselves pretty effectively from another assault by the government, but they were also able to advance the broader political and ideological project that the entire Amway
good.
universe was, at least in part,
I'm sorry.
created to build. We're almost finished, but we do have to turn to that story next, before we conclude.
Oh, good. Wah, wah, wah.
We've already observed
inventory
the
is
political
full.
nature of the Amway enterprise. Almost without
Shut up,
exception,
you.
Amway
You're
distributors
so
are
annoying.
and have historically been conservative Republicans. I profiled Doug Weed, Tools Cult Kingpin,
Doug
and
Weed.
Pipeline from the religious right to the Bush family.
I've got some Doug
in Chapter
Weed.
6. In addition to him, it's worth exploring briefly the ties between
Doug
the Tools
Weed.
Cult and the broader project, afoot beginning in the 1970s,
Afoot.
to turn America's politics sharply to the right.
Oh, there's projects
and to
afoot.
entrench and
To turn
broaden
us all
the
to the
power
right.
of evangelical Christians in particular. Dexter
Yay,
Yeager was a
evangelical
member of an
Christians,
organization called the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, FGBMFI. This was a hard
GBMFI.
Christian right organization,
Oh, my
based in the
God.
Pentecostal evangelical movement
Oh,
that
good.
expanded throughout the South in the 1950s
I'm sorry.
and essentially built the ideology that we now call prosperity gospel. Others in
good.
this same organization or connected to it included
it.
Oral Roberts, the Osteen family, including today's Joel Osteen, and televangelist
Not Joel
Jim
Osteen.
Baker, who
Jim
became a
Baker.
close friend
Oh,
of
Jim
Dexter
Baker.
Yeager. In
Ugh.
fact, Yeager was something of a mentor to Baker, who began to
Boo!
incorporate
Get off the
the
stage, you
style and
fucking snake
messaging
oil
of the
salesman.
Amway motivational tools into his own efforts to spread
Jim and
politically
Tammy Faye.
conservative, capitalist-oriented Christian
Get off the
gospel,
stage, you fucking
particularly
scrub.
through the
God
medium
doesn't
of
love
television.
you.
In the mid-1970s,
Thief.
after his falling out with Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network in
Pat
California,
Robertson.
Jim and Tammy Faye Baker moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where they founded the televangelist PTL ministry. One of the factors that drew them there was Yeager's presence in the Charlotte community. Yeager himself later sat on the board of PTL. A historian who studied Baker's life and career analyzed the televangelist's relationship with Dexter Yeager like this, quote, Baker was especially interested to learn how to apply Yeager's inspirational messages and
Yeager's-
techniques
Yeagerman's
to his
schmore
own
schnapps.
ministry. In fact, he was so enthralled with Yeager that he became an Amway sales associate and attended weekly meetings with Yeager, Doug Weed, and other important members of the Amway organization. These meetings and the connections with Amway and with Yeager inspired Baker to make prosperity theology an even more important part of his ministry, and he began to learn from Yeager how to market and sell
Not
his
Yeager.
message. Yeager, meanwhile, endorsed
Yeager.
PTL and encouraged his distributors to
PTL
support
and Yeager.
Baker's new network. He also liked to flaunt his own
Hurry up,
success
you. Go.
with PTL employees by walking around the offices with a shoulder satchel containing $20,000 of, quote, pocket money.
Pocket money.
PTL and Jim and Tammy Faye were part of a larger movement that grew in the mid-1970s. This movement, in which politically conservative evangelicals were prominent, was a backlash to the cultural and economic liberalism of the 1960s. LBJ's Great Society, the protests against the Vietnam War, and particularly the phenomenon of second-wave feminism and the LGBTQ liberation movement. This counter-reaction would manifest itself later in the decade with the foundation of the Moral Majority, Jerry Falwell's political action organization. This galvanizing of the Christian right wing was instrumental in propelling Ronald Reagan to the White House in 1980. Seeing it all in context, doesn't it make sense that Doug Weed, another of Dexter Yeager's protégés, wrote Reagan's campaign biography? It makes sense, doesn't it, that Reagan spoke at an Amway convention organized by Dexter Yeager. The Tools cult was not just a way to make vast amounts of money, though clearly it was that. It was also a political and ideological project to remake America. There's an environmental component to this too. Part of the new consciousness that developed in the 1970s involved an understanding that America had limits, ecological and environmental limits, to consumption, pollution, and ultimately to profits. To true believers in the ideology of capitalism, any hint of limits,
on me or the crawler?
Otherwise, are absolutely unacceptable. Part of the core beliefs of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, the organization to which Dexter Yeager and Jim Baker belonged, was that the American dream was embodied by economic growth and personal prosperity, and also that these things were core tenets of Christianity. So the dreams promised by the Tools cult really were the point.
Your skill has increased.
About the coach, the boat, the mansion, and the fur coats, the stuff that Amway believers were instructed to cut out pictures of and paste on their refrigerators to remind themselves daily of what they'd have on that magical day that they go diamond. Fused to
the coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat. The coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat. The coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat. It's like a fucking bad rap. The coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat. Oh my god, so bad. The coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat. The coach, the boat, the mansions, and the fur coat.
Together with the politics and the theology of prosperity gospel,
the coat,
Amway
the boat,
itself.
The coat, the boat, the mansion, and the fur
becomes something righteous and holy, and anyone outside the cult is an enemy. Consider again what Amway lawyer Bob Abrahams said during the Miami showdown.
I wonder what the Blazer Beetle is. He's 52 EM.
Because they're confronted with the enemy, and the enemy happens to be the liberals of this country at the moment.
The enemy happens to be the liberals.
It wasn't just politics and economics, though. As the hold of the Christian right wing over America tightened in the 1980s and 90s, homophobia became one of the major characteristics of their movement, and a major policy plank of the Republican Party. After 1991, there was no more Soviet Union, and the specter of global communism was no longer available as a punching bag and a unifying threat for the conservative right. Some gay leaders argue that hatred of the LGBTQ community began to replace anti-communism as the galvanizing ideology within the American conservative movement, more powerful even than their powerful opposition to abortion rights. It should come as no surprise that on the many thousands of hours of tapes that exist of Dexter Yeager extemporizing, particularly at those supercharged Amway rallies and packed stadiums, there are homophobic statements from him condemning the LGBTQ community and criticizing the so-called gay lifestyle. Yeager's attacks on the LGBTQ community had a political component too. In the 1990s, he attacked Hillary Clinton, a favorite target of the right wing, as a lesbian, and charged that the Secret Service brought her lesbian lovers into the White House, a story that he told to 5,000 Amway distributors of the Fred Hartice organization, itself a spin-off of Yeager's line. Because, of course, being a Democrat and being a lesbian were comparable sins in the politicized Christian worldview of the Amway Tools cult. In March 1987, Jim Baker was brought down as head of the PTL ministry in a series of scandals in which he was accused of diverting funds from his ministry to pay blackmail money to his mistress, Jessica Hahn. When the story broke, Baker went into hiding to avoid the press and also his aggrieved wife, Tammy Faye. Where exactly did he go to hide? to a guest house on Dexter Yeager's estate. Jim Baker eventually went to prison for fraud and conspiracy. Curiously, despite Baker's closeness to him, Dexter Yeager does not appear as a character in the 2021 film The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which dramatizes the Bakers' lives and careers. Most of the major participants in our story are gone now. Bill Britt, first to mass-produce Tools Cult tapes, died in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida in January 2013. In the latter part of his career, he concentrated heavily on building Amway downlines and spreading the Tools Cult to India. He seems to have had a falling out with Dexter Yeager at some point, but I didn't spend much time researching that. Doug Weed, who documented the birth of the Tools Cult and certainly profited from it, passed away in December 2021.
Oh no, it's another water elemental.
Amway Corporation died in December 2004.
Maybe I'll just stay where I was.
His partner, Rich DeVos, passed away in September 2018. The master kingpin himself, Dexter Yeager, died peacefully at his home in Charlotte, North Carolina on January 6, 2019. There are numerous tributes to him on the web, many from obvious acolytes of the Tools Cult, who still speak of him effusively and parrot the bromides that he spent decades delivering. The Tools Cult continues on to this day. It remains a major focus of the criticism directed at the Amway phenomenon as a whole, particularly from the anti-MLM movement. The legality of the tools business remains officially untested by the FTC or federal courts. The advance of the broader political and social project of the Amway universe and the increasing share of the American economy that's tied up in ever-multiplying MLM grifts leaves me skeptical that there will ever be any meaningful official action to disrupt these organizations. Historically, in my opinion, there needs to be a lot more attention paid to this story, which I believe lies at the heart of the history of American business, economics, and politics in the past 60 years. In my view, the fact that Dexter Yeager, love him or hate him, is not recognized as one of the most important and influential people in recent American history